John Roberts had always believed that power lay in the black robe he wore, a symbol of the judiciary's unyielding authority. For years, he had presided over the Supreme Court with the quiet confidence that the law was his shield, the Constitution his sword. But today, as he prepared to hear a case that could define the future of American democracy, he was about to discover that true power lay somewhere else entirely, in the defiance of an administration that refused to bend, and in the hands of a woman who stood before him now, her voice sharp enough to cut through the silence of the courtroom. Attorney General Pam Bondi. "Your Honor," Bondi began, her tone a mix of defiance and barely concealed contempt, "the American people elected President Trump to secure our borders, to protect our communities from the scourge of illegal immigration. And yet, here we are with the Supreme Court, a group of unelected justices, standing in the way of that mandate. I ask you, Chief Justice Roberts, who gave you the right to overrule the will of the people?" Roberts felt a surge of unease. He had heard this rhetoric before, the same lines the Trump administration used whenever a judge challenged their policies. But this time, it was different. The administration had openly defied a lower court's order to halt deportation flights of alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador, and now the case had landed in his courtroom. The air crackled with tension, as if the very foundation of the law itself was trembling. He leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "Ms. Bondi," he said, "I am not here to serve the will of the people, as you put it. I am here to serve the Constitution. And the Constitution does not bend to the whims of any administration, no matter how loudly they claim to speak for the public. A federal judge issued an injunction to halt those deportation flights, citing a lack of due process. The administration defied that order. Planes took off. People were deported. This is a direct challenge to the authority of the judiciary, and I will not stand for it." Bondi smirked, a flash of defiance in her eyes. Her voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it, a challenge that made Robert's stomach tighten. "With all due respect, Chief Justice," she said, "the administration has every right to act under the Alien Enemies Act. These individuals are a threat to national security. We have evidence, credible evidence, that they are tied to violent gangs. And yet you, sitting up there in your black robe, think you know better than the President of the United States? Better than the Department of Justice? You're not protecting the Constitution, Your Honor. You're obstructing justice." The words hit Roberts like a slap. Obstructing justice? He had spent his career upholding the law, ensuring that the judiciary remained a co-equal branch of government, independent from political pressure. And now here was the Attorney General of the United States, accusing him of treasonous behavior in his own courtroom. He felt a surge of anger but forced himself to remain composed. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice rising slightly, "the evidence you speak of has not been presented to any court. You claim these individuals are gang members, but where are the affidavits? Where are the witnesses? The administration has provided nothing but vague assertions, and I will not allow you to trample on due process simply because it suits your agenda. The lower court's order stands, and I expect the administration to comply immediately." Bondi's smirk faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, each word dripping with defiance. "And if we don't?" she asked. "What then, Chief Justice? Will you hold the president in contempt? Will you send marshals to arrest me? Because I'll tell you right now, this administration will not bow to your order. We answer to the American people, not to you." The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Roberts felt a chill run down his spine. He had faced defiant litigants before, but never like this. Never had a sitting attorney general stood before him and openly declared that the executive branch would ignore a court order. This wasn't just a challenge to his authority, it was a challenge to the entire judiciary, to the very separation of powers that held the government together. "I will give you one chance to reconsider, Ms. Bondi," Roberts said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "If the administration does not comply with the lower court's order by the end of the day, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter. Do you understand the gravity of what you're doing? You're inviting a constitutional crisis." Bondi didn't flinch. Instead, her voice grew louder, more forceful, as if she were speaking not just to Roberts, but to the entire nation. A constitutional crisis, she said. No, Chief Justice. What we're doing is taking back control from unelected judges who think they can dictate policy from the bench. You want to talk about the Constitution? Let's talk about the power of the executive branch to protect this nation. Let's talk about the will of the people who voted for President Trump to do exactly what he's doing. You may think you're upholding the law, but to the American people, you're just another activist judge standing in the way of progress. And I promise you, Chief Justice Roberts, you will not win this fight. Roberts sat back, his mind racing. He had known the Trump administration was aggressive, but this was something else entirely. This was a direct assault on the rule of law, and he knew he couldn't let it stand. But what could he do? The administration had already defied the lower court's order. Planes had taken off, deportees had been sent to El Salvador, and now Bondi was openly challenging the Supreme Court's authority. He needed to act, and he needed to act fast. Ms. Bondi, he said, his voice steady but laced with resolve, you are treading on dangerous ground. The judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, and we will not be intimidated by threats or defiance. I will confer with my colleagues, and we will issue a ruling by the end of the day. But let me be clear, if the administration continues to defy the courts, there will be consequences. Bondi's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. She turned and left the courtroom, her parting words echoing in Roberts' mind. You will not win this fight. He knew she meant it. The Trump administration had powerful allies. President Trump himself, influential figures like Elon Musk, and a Republican-controlled Congress that was already holding hearings to curb judicial power. Roberts felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle for the soul of American democracy. In the hours that followed, Roberts gathered the other justices in their private chambers. The tension among them was palpable. Justice Sonia Sotomayor spoke first, her voice sharp with frustration. Chief Justice Shisham, she said, we cannot let this stand. Pam Bondi just stood in your courtroom and told you the administration would not comply with a court order. That's not a negotiation. It's a declaration of war on the judiciary. If we don't act decisively, we're sending a message that the executive branch can do whatever it wants, and the courts are powerless to stop them. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a Trump appointee, countered, his tone more measured. I understand your concern, Justice Sotomayor, he said, but we have to consider the broader implications. The administration claims they're acting under the Alien Enemies Act, which gives the president broad authority in matters of national security. If we rule against them, we risk being seen as overreaching, as activist judges meddling in policy. The public is already divided. Polls show that a majority support the deportations when they're tied to criminal records. We could lose what little trust the court still has. Roberts listened to the debate, his mind racing. He had spent his career trying to maintain the Supreme Court's neutrality, to keep it above the political fray. But now, with the Trump administration openly defying the judiciary, he could no longer stay silent. He spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision before them. This is not just about the deportation flights, he said. This is about the very foundation of our democracy. If the executive branch can ignore a court order without consequence, then what is the point of the judiciary? What is the point of the separation of powers? We cannot allow this to stand. But Justice Kavanaugh is right. We must be careful. The public is divided, and the administration has powerful allies. We must issue a ruling that upholds the law without inflaming the situation further. The justices deliberated for hours, their arguments growing more heated with each passing minute. Sotomayor pushed for a strong ruling, one that would hold the administration in contempt if they continued to defy the courts. Kavanaugh urged caution, warning that a heavy-handed approach could backfire. Finally, they reached a decision. Roberts would draft the majority opinion, a narrow ruling that reaffirmed the judiciary's authority to issue binding orders while giving the administration a chance to comply before further action was taken. It was a compromise, one that Roberts hoped would de-escalate the crisis while still protecting the rule of law. That afternoon, Roberts delivered the ruling from the bench, his voice steady but firm. The Supreme Court has reviewed the administration's actions in defying the lower court's order to halt the deportation flights, he said. We find that the administration's actions violate the separation of powers and undermine the rule of law. The lower court's injunction is upheld, and the administration is ordered to comply immediately. Failure to do so will result in further action by this court, including the possibility of holding the responsible parties in contempt. The ruling was a clear rebuke of the administration, but Roberts knew it was only the beginning. He had given Bondi and the administration a chance to back down, but deep down he feared they wouldn't, and he was right. That evening, Pam Bondi appeared on national television, her face a mask of defiance. She spoke directly to the American people, her voice filled with conviction. "The Supreme Court thinks they can stop us," she said, "but they're wrong. Chief Justice Roberts and his colleagues are out of touch with the American people. They think they can dictate policy from the bench, but we will not let them. The deportation flights will continue. We will protect this nation, no matter what the courts say. And mark my words, the American people will see the judiciary for what it truly is, a tool of the Democrats bent on obstructing the will of the people." Roberts watched the broadcast from his office, his heart sinking. A tool of the Democrats? The accusation stung, but he couldn't deny that the public's perception of the judiciary had shifted. Polls showed that a growing number of Americans, especially Trump supporters, viewed the courts as biased, as activist judges who were more interested in pushing a liberal agenda than upholding the law. Roberts had always prided himself on his neutrality, but now he wondered if he had been naive. Had the judiciary, under his leadership, drifted too far to the left? The next morning, the administration made good on Bondi's promise. Deportation flights continued, in direct defiance of the Supreme Court's ruling. Protests erupted across the country, with Trump supporters rallying behind Bondi's message. They held signs that read, "Judges for Democrats," and "Courts against the people." Meanwhile, Democratic leaders praised the Supreme Court's ruling, with figures like Senator Elizabeth Warren calling it a victory for due process and the rule of law. The divide was stark, and Roberts couldn't help but feel that the judiciary was being painted into a corner. In the days that followed, the situation grew even more dire. Republican leaders in Congress, emboldened by Bondi's defiance, introduced legislation to curb judicial power. They proposed measures to limit the court's ability to issue injunctions against executive actions, arguing that the judiciary had overstepped its bounds. At the same time, influential figures like Elon Musk took to social media, amplifying Bondi's message. "The courts are a joke," Musk posted on X. "Roberts and his crew are just Democrat puppets. Time to take back control for the people." The post went viral, garnering millions of likes and shares. Roberts read the comments with a growing sense of dread. The public's trust in the judiciary was eroding, and he couldn't help but wonder if Bondi was right. Had the courts, in their quest to uphold the law, become too aligned with democratic ideals? Had they lost sight of the broader will of the people? Roberts called another emergency meeting with the justices, his voice heavy with concern. "We're losing the public," he said. "The administration's defiance is working. They're painting us as biased, as tools of the Democrats, and the American people are starting to believe them. We need to act, but I'm not sure what we can do. If we hold Bondi in contempt, we risk further alienating the public. But if we do nothing, we're sending a message that the judiciary is powerless." Justice Sotomayor spoke up, her voice sharp with frustration. "Chief Justice," she said, "we cannot let public opinion dictate our actions. The law is the law, and the administration is breaking it. We have to hold them in contempt, no matter what the public thinks. If we back down now, we're surrendering the judiciary's independence." Justice Kavanaugh shook his head, his voice tense. "And what happens then?" he asked. "Do we send marshals to arrest the Attorney General? Do we expect the executive branch to comply when they have already shown they won't? The public will see this as a power grab by the judiciary, and we'll lose what little credibility we have left. We're already being called Democrat puppets. Do we really want to give them more ammunition?" Roberts listened to the arguments, his mind racing. He had always believed in the judiciary's independence, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a losing battle. The administration had the public on their side, and the judiciary was being cast as the villain. He spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "I fear we may have already lost," he said. "The public's perception of us has shifted, and we cannot ignore that. If we push forward with contempt charges, we risk a complete breakdown of trust in the judiciary. But if we do nothing, we're admitting defeat. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know this. Pam Bondi was right. The judiciary has become too aligned with the Democrats, at least in the eyes of the American people, and that may be our undoing. The justices sat in silence, the weight of Robert's words sinking in. They had fought to uphold the law, but in doing so, they had lost the trust of the nation. Bondi's defiance had exposed a truth they couldn't ignore. The judiciary, under Robert's leadership, had drifted too far from the center, and now they were paying the price. In the weeks that followed, the deportation flights continued, and the Supreme Court took no further action. Public opinion solidified around Bondi's narrative, with more and more Americans viewing the judiciary as a tool of the Democrats. Roberts watched from the sidelines, his heart heavy with the realization that the institution he had spent his life defending was now seen as a partisan player in a political game. Bondi had been right all along, and the judges, including Roberts himself, had become the very thing they had sworn to avoid, a reflection of the Democratic agenda, at least in the eyes of the nation.